All life on Earth is originally from Mars. Well, according to this guy. Between all the unsolved scientific questions that we all still troubled with, there is no doubt that the most bizarre and complicated one is, where did life come from? For decades, scientists have diligently investigated the early stages of evolution, hoping to eliminate the origin of life. Yet, significant questions remain unanswered, leaving us with a sense of incomplete understanding of life. But why? What fundamental barriers have consistently hit the scientific progress in this area? Well, the main reason for the scientists' trouble in explaining the origin of life lies in the fact that we still don't know what life actually is. So, where did life come from? Well, we'll talk about it now. Science has different stages of complexity. Generally, in the world that surrounds us, physics describes to us the essence of everything and tells us that everything in the world is either packets of energy or body of matter. When it gets more complicated, it turns into chemistry, which is the science of compounds and reactions that occur between the molecules. But when it gets even more complicated, it will be called biology. Biology basically is the science of the livings, alive creatures which after their birth, they consume, reproduce, and die after a period of time. The creature's shape can change and evolve through time, depending on the nature and the environment that was either naturally created by the planet or the creature itself. About 1.9 million species exist on our planet, which all of them are the result of 3.7 billion years of evolution. All these 1.9 million species trace back to the creation of prokaryotic cell, which is recognized as the first living organism on Earth. Before that, Earth was in a harsh and warm condition with a huge lack of oxygen and ozone layer in the atmosphere. More than half of the land masses were ruled by the volcanic activities, and the land surface was likely a barren rock with no significant soil development. With all these harsh conditions, how were the organic cells created? Basically, what do we need to create life? Well, it's about time to make the first DIY tutorial on how to create life. The first thing we need to create life is energy. Examples are geothermal temperature or the sunlight. Life is an active process that requires a constant input of energy to maintain its highly organized state and perform essential functions. Without a continuous source of energy, living systems cannot sustain themselves and will eventually cease to function. The amount of the received energy shall be enough and suitable. Sun radiation is the most accessible source of energy in our solar system. But the sun radiation could be harmful or even ineffective for some planets in our solar system. The position of the planet should be on the right orbit to create the fit environment. Not too hot, not too cold. 2. We need diversity in heavy elements. Examples are oxygen, carbon, and also sulfur. Diversity in chemical elements gives life the capability and the opportunity to choose the appropriate elements that can combine and create links and bonds between other elements. For Earth's environment, carbon is the best element to create life. The word organic itself is made for the molecules that are made out of oxygen and carbon. Carbon atoms can form stable covalent bonds with up to 4 other atoms, including themselves. It also helps to form the backbone of all essential organic molecules, such as carbohydrates, proteins, and also nucleic acid. 3. We need liquid. The best example is water. Why? Because in gas, atoms move and pass each other with a high velocity. And in solid, obviously, atoms don't move and they are stable in their position. But in liquid, atoms have the ability to connect, combine, create lines and curves, opening nexus between other atoms to create higher molecules. Liquid water was a great motive and engine for the creation and evolution of life throughout the history of Earth. Molecules easily melt in liquid water, which helps us create even more complex chemical group. Creating life doesn't necessarily require H2O water. For example, Carl Sagan predicted that Saturn's moon Titan could be flooded with methane lakes, which they got the potential to help the planet create life. Energy, heavy elements, liquid, these are the simplest and the most basic things you need to create life. You might think that you know how life on Earth was created. You know, at first it was in the deep ocean, there was a lot of heat and energy, but that's actually one of the dozens of other theories on how life on Earth was created. Let's talk about the top theories on how life on Earth was created. The first theory, panspermia. Panspermia means that the seeds of life are spread across the cosmos. It basically means that life on Earth doesn't have to be formed on Earth. The first people who proposed this idea were a couple of astronomers called Fred Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe, who studied a group of gas clouds with telescopes and claimed that microorganisms lived on these clouds. Another scientist who believed in panspermia was Stephen Benner, who proposed this idea that life on Earth could have accidentally arrived from Mars. He believed that billions of years ago, Mars was showered by meteors and asteroids. Due to the impact, a couple of Martian rocks were thrown to the outer space, carrying microorganisms with itself, traveling to Earth and adapting with the environment. The second theory, conservates. My fellow chemists are familiar with this word. Basically, a conservate is a droplet of macromolecules such as proteins, lipids, or nucleic acid that spontaneously form within a solution through a process called liquid-liquid phase separation. Wait, that's not a theory. That's a chemical process. Exactly. That's what life is. It's a chemical process. What conservating generally states is that life is just an evolutionary stage in the universe. Quarks form protons and neutrons, which they'll turn into nucleus, which eventually it will turn into atoms. Atoms will turn into molecules, which these molecules will eventually turn into more complex stage, which is called organic cells. What we call alive and unalive and all this process is just an illusion. Life is a part of these chemical reactions and formations, and it is just an evolutionary stage in the universe. As Neil deGrasse Tyson said, we are stardust in its highest exotic stage. The third theory, electrical gas spark. In 1952, a Chicago student named Stanley Miller, out of curiosity, convinced the Nobel Prize winner Harold Urey to expose a mixture of gases to an electric spark. He theorized that electrical discharges like thunderbolts may have triggered chemical reactions in the early Earth's atmosphere before life began. They assumed that the atmosphere on that time was made out of hydrogen, methane, ammoniac, and steamed water. So they collected these gases and filled them inside a glass tube. After many days of electrically sparking the glass tube, the mixture of gases turned into red, which days later, the red color turned into brown. It was a good news for Miller and Urey because they knew something was happening. When Miller carefully observed the leftover water of the tube, he reached into a significant conclusion. A bunch of amino acids were created. He eventually released and shared his article in 1953, and it was officially the first scientific research for the origin of life. The fourth theory, hydrothermal vents. This is the most famous and popular theory for the origin of life that was firstly proposed in 1977, after discovering these hydrothermal vents in a submarine diving near Galapagos Islands. The heat surge that is released from these thermal gates is actually a deep under-ocean magma river. The black smoke that comes out of these vents is made out of metal sulfide. Therefore, the acidic water near the vents can reach to over 300 degrees Celsius. Later in 2001, scientists discovered another hydrothermal vent under ocean valleys between Africa and America. This time, thermal vents were releasing white smoke, which instead of using magmas as a heat source, they used a chemical reaction called serpentinization, which is the result of seawater mixture with seafloor minerals. This reaction created a highly alkaline water with a little bit of hydrogen in it. Both of these vents supported microscopic bacteria and even more bigger organisms such as tube worm, which created the theory among the scientists that life could have been formed out of these vents due to the existence of chemical energy on the vents gate. There are other theories such as metabolism life theory or mineral rocks theory that believes life could have formed on the land, but we better leave these topics for another day. Next time we open this subject again, not only will we be talking about these theories, but we'll also talk about evolution and the natural selection, and we'll start wondering about the future of organisms and why we still didn't find any other signs of life in the universe. But until that day, do not stop wondering and be curious.